used around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Thank you, John Larson. I receive your kind words on behalf of all of our courageous members of the House of Representatives who want the best for the American people. And what we can do that is best for them in the next 24 hours is to pass affordable, accessible health care for all Americans. The best for all Americans is to have 32 million more people to have health insurance in our country. The best for...
Piece of stinking filth.
Shh, you're saying against Shal. This is AJ of the InfoWars. Listen to the Shaliak. This is Alex Jones of InfoWars. Listen to Shaliak on the Cold Reality News and Report.
This is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Well, hello there.
Welcome, folks. You're in the Cold Reality Radio Show report. This is Clint filling in for Shali. I am having some technical difficulties here. I'm not sure if anybody, if anybody's listening out there, but I'm trying to connect my friend Daniel, who I used to have with me for quite some time, on my own radio show, but I can't seem to mix the two on Skype here, so I'm just trying to figure that out. Very important, to get Daniel on here. But for some reason, I can't seem to drag Daniel into the conversation. So, I'm not sure what to do about that. I will try to speak and do this at the same time, which is very difficult. But I was thinking today a lot about, well, Daniel was actually very important in my life. And I really want him to hear this, but, I don't know how to do this. So, it figures, it figures that this is the way it always works out, or doesn't work out. Yeah, anybody that can chime in and tell me how to join a call would be great, because I don't know what the heck. Oh well. Geez, I don't know what to do here, but I'm very upset. Add people. No, that's not right. Come on. It's so frustrating. They change these programs and make it so you can't do what you always have done. And that's what's happening. What the heck do I do? Add people? Is that right? Again, I apologize, guys. We have a great show lined up today, but I can't seem to... Oh, hey, look at there. I think I found it. Oh, let's see if this works out.
Hey.
Greetings, Daniel. Do we have you?
I'm here.
Okay, I'm sorry, man. They changed Skype on me, and since I downloaded the new version, and they don't let you do what you used to do, so I was having a problem there. And I didn't want to say what I had to say about you until I had you on the line. So, Daniel was with me on the Corporation Nation radio show. So this is sort of a self-indulgence of mine to have Daniel on today and get reacquainted and hear what's been happening with Daniel. But Daniel was one of sort of, if you will, he was sort of the one pillar of strength that would join me every Wednesday, I believe it was, and as we progressed into learning the Bible, what the words really meant, and how religion had really screwed up everything, organized religion. We together we went down this rabbit hole, this road, only to discover that it turns out we were in the rabbit hole and we were trying to get out of it. We were trying to find reality again. We were trying to only to discover that it was always right under our feet. That the truth is nowhere to be found in this so-called truth movement, in this alternative or mainstream or any other stream of information that's coming our way, because information is not necessarily truth. What I found, and I think Daniel is one of the few people that I think will really understand what I'm saying here, is that truth is not something that you find. Truth is as self-evident, self-existence, that which is and always has and always shall be. A lot of people call that God. It's right under our feet. It's everywhere around us. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It's the blood in our veins that causes eternal life. What is eternal life? Well, it's hopefully your father's life, your life, and your child's life that you're going to pass on to live in eternity. What I found is that it's not so much that you wake up from the Matrix. It's that you realize that all of this simulation and simulacrum has been put forward, put over, if you will, covered, symbolized, and represented reality in ways that take you away from worshiping that which is creation, nature, and you really come to a sort of a harsh realization, Daniel, and this is kind of the meme I want to get to, is that I was looking at the word persecution, right? Because I've been feeling sorry for myself, if you will. I've been feeling that sort of persecution from other radio show hosts, from people who will just flat out tell me that they hate me because I talk about God or because I talk about the Bible. Mostly I'm convinced that these people aren't actually hearing what I'm saying, that they hear the word Bible or God and they just instantly tune out and just aren't getting what I'm saying, because no one is more against religion than me, and no one is more against the popular opinion of what God is than me. And so I'm a little confused, or I was a little confused. But then I realized, Daniel, when I looked at the word persecution, I found it to be a very relieving word, because it means to pursue, to vex or afflict, to harass with unjust punishments or penalties, or for supposed offenses, and to inflict pain, strictly from hate and from malignity, appropriately to afflict, harass, or destroy for adherence to a particular creed or system of religious principles. Now, when we say religious principles, that means law. That doesn't mean what the Pope says. That doesn't mean what the Methodist Church or the Mormon Church says. That's the law. That's talking about the law that you want to follow religiously, not anything else, or to a mode of worship, And so what I found, and also to harass with solicitations or importunity, which again could be equated to tickets or summonses to appear in court or anything of a legal nature. And so what I find, Daniel, is that persecution is a prerequisite. It is something that you must go through. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because if you think about it, and you can use the Matrix model again, What happens when you wake up from this illusion, this matrix, this legal system, and you realize everything and everyone in it is a fraud? What happens when you start pointing out the fact that people aren't using their real names, that they're using pseudonyms? What happens to when you point out that people are actually promoting lies and calling it the truth? Well, even your fellow hosts, your fellow people in the quote-unquote truth movement start to turn against you and persecute you. And I find, Daniel, that this is a blessing. It's something that has to happen in order to actually remove yourself from that matrix, that legal code that causes everything to act horribly and against their own nature. You have to remove yourself from it. You have to remove yourself from all of the illusions, all of the lies, and by doing that, you become a visibly changed and different man. You become a man of God. You start following the law of God. You start challenging everything people are doing as a ritual, as a custom, as a holiday. You start challenging. You start saying, no, I don't want to participate in that. They're going to do everything they can to bring you back into their miserable system. And that is the truth of what persecution is. It is not a hatred of you. It's a hatred of the fact that you've somehow escaped this horrible, horrible, horrible tradition and custom, this cult that everybody's in that we call culture. That is what persecution is. It has to happen. It is par for the course. You cannot finally come back to the truth that's been there the whole time, right under your feet, from all that fiction, from all those lies, and not expect to be persecuted. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, 100%. We're in a society that is nothing but show, pomp, make believe, pretend. Everything is about the opposite of reality. As you said earlier, that we are in reality, but we don't see it. Nature doesn't do what we do. It does not have debt. It doesn't have a banking system that you are not able to tap into yourself. So nature deals with storage. Squirrels will store up what they need for the time when they're not going to be able to find things as easily. But it's all free. It's all there. They're not in debt. They don't rent out trees to other squirrels and say, tree for rent. But we think that's reality in the society we are. So we have to pay to exist. That doesn't make any sense. So our society going down legal has really undone or tried to undo truth through a fiction or a non-reality, a system that's based on everything's for sale, value, greed, and power that isn't even real. It's artificial power. It's fear, intimidation.
Would you actually agree when I say, because I'm trying to form this in my mind, it's a sort of a realization that I never kind of could fathom before, is that the whole concept of citizenship, the whole concept of being part of a nation, a goyim of the nation, to be born in the nation, the whole concept of this legal personhood that we keep, harping on, is persecution. It is what persecution is. And the folks who call themselves Christians, who take that flattering title but show nothing in their works, in their actions that actually purport that title. It's just an empty word, an empty title. Even in the Bible, it's an empty title, created by Caesar, in fact. So we Is it not accurate then to say that the very structure of man's law, the very structure of legal law, is in fact the epitome of persecution, and that in fact that persecution has been going on since this country was built? a system, a matrix, if you will, of persecution that has caused people not to follow, as it says, their particular creed or system of religious principles. I mean, how many people do you know, Daniel, are denying their surname, are denying their benefits and their privileges and their homes, their social security benefits, their pensions? How many people do you know are actually acting in that way where they're free from this persecutive system? I don't know any. And it seems to me that that's what this system is. If what is to pursue in a manner to injure? Well, that's what they do with the birth certificate. They pursue your parents with a vengeance and tell them you must fill out this birth certificate. In other words, you must cause this child to be injured. When injure means to bring into law. Jure is law. To vex and afflict with some artificial thing, to harass with unjust punishment or penalties. Well, birth is a felony, folks. That's why you can never win in court, because you're a loser the second you step in. You have been persecuted. You're in a persecutive system perfected to the point where you don't even realize it's happening. You actually call it freedom. And you never realize that you're being persecuted on a daily basis with every license that you have, with every aspect of this legal system is a persecution. Now, am I correct in saying that?
Oh, yes. Even when you do research into at least the way the word is used in society, in this legal registration system. Remember, it's a legal registration. The last name or the surname, or what we call this Roman family name, which is not what people, may think in their mind it means. You have to go to what they're implying it to mean, or at least putting it on paper to mean. And that legal registration is only dealing with that title, that make-believe, that pretend. That's what they're registering on that date. And if you do due diligence through all the statistical acts that the government passes, here it's called the Vital Statistics Act. I'm sure it's probably similar in other places. But in there, the Vital Statistics Act, the registration of birth only applies to the last name. It does not apply to the given name. It only applies to the last name, even though they need to have somebody with lack of truth step in, place a name on that record that they can assign that debt to, because without that, they have no participants. But uniquely, the given name, when you do the research on those registrations, they come after the record has been placed. So the legal registration is only dealing with the last name. It's after that birth name that they place the given name on the record officially. So they're considering that your given name is after birth. But in reality, the surname is actually the after birth, the waste. The after acquired artificial property that you take on in ignorance, not realizing what you're going to place the burden on. So 1828, Noah Webster's defines birth. One of its definitions is burden. And that's the burden of proof they require in the court to know who's coming into the court to give the judge and transfer what is alienable to the judge so the judge can actually penalize you, because he said if you had the ability to transfer this on to me in the court as God, going to make rendering and judgment, well, then you must have had it in your possession by trespass and infringement. So they're only looking to see who is trespassing on their property, and that's the only way legal works. It must have someone infringing on it by a license, where someone is saying, I will pay for the indulgence, and there's no way you're going to win in there. You've already came in, and law will never, or equity will never support a volunteer. So all these people have been walking around in crazy Canada. They've had people print out T-shirts, I'm not the person. I go, what the heck are you doing at the court if you're not the person? And get your butt out of that court and don't show up, and then let them drag you in there by force, because then you've got at least a solution going to come, because at least you can, at that point, state that you are there involuntarily, against your consent, and you place the burden of proof upon the court to prove, or the prosecutor, that you have any legal entitlement to that last name. And they got no proof in that court, so the burden of proof is just going to sit there in a kind of a stagnating position, and no one's going to know how to proceed.
Well, you're saying,
so we walk in and claim it, and that's where our problem comes in, because we're claiming a lie. We're claiming something very serious. We're claiming a fiction, which is just a fancy word for a lie. And that's the ultimate enemy of truth.
You're saying that by even claiming and using the name in everyday process, whether it's filling out, your signature or whatever, you're saying that it's even worse, because we understand that the person is the property, is the status that's and that's all a person ever is a status, a form without substance, never man himself. But you're saying that the last name specifically is property of the state, and that by claiming it as our own property, we are breaking the law. So what you're really saying is that we are like little, we open up the game of Monopoly, we've stepped the board up, we put the cards out, we have chance, which actually is a legal term that means exactly what you'd think, chance, hazard, and insurance, that kind of thing, and community chest, right? And so we have our little avatars, our little persons, our little cars, our little vessels, our citizenships, and we sail on that artificial sea of commerce. Round and round we go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $100, and if you do, pay $100 in tax. Right. So it all comes back to government anyway. What you're saying is that basically that is exactly what we are little characters that are always, in every respect, using someone else's name, which is someone else's property, and also that we're always on someone else's land, because we own no land of our own in our true selves. The only way that we can own anything as citizenships is, of course, through the person, through the registration process, which means tax. And so no matter what we do in this lie that we are living, this fact that we're calling the property of another our own, attaching it to our God-given Christian name, if you will, that very assignment of the last name is literally to seek and essay, or to persecute a child before he's even old enough to realize what happened.
Yeah, it's putting them into an imprinting ahead of time that is only implied, and I always wanted to find the word implied the way I see it from just breaking words. It's, imp is a devil or a demon, and then lied. Yeah. So when they imply something, it's like the word insinuation.
Yeah.
Insinuate, that's what Adam and, in Adam and Eve in the Genesis account ate from the forbidden fruit. So it's forbidden to bid on a man, but not on a fiction. So evil was bidding on them touching the fiction, the lie that wasn't reality. So insinuate Adam and Eve. When God saw that they had eaten from that tree, most likely the fig leaves represented them covering up the truth with a lie. They were really, in truth, naked. You can put all the covering you want. You were still coming into the world naked, and you go out that way in reality, whether they put a suit on you or not. But this whole thing is dealing with this lie, and the thing that the Scripture was so strong about was the thing that God hated the most was a lie, liars. And that's why, Christ was calling the Pharisees snakes and vipers.
Well,
they were liars.
we live in a it's so strange when you truly start getting it, when you start seeing it for what it is. You realize that there's a state of honesty and there's a state of dishonesty. And we know that the word dis is the word that Dante assigned to the devil. Right? That was one of the names that Dante put on the devil. So you have a disposition, you have dis-ease, which is to not be at ease. Everything that starts with dis is generally a bad concept, right? It's generally the opposite of something that is normal or good, right? So this notion that we are put into a disposition that from birth, that we're put into a state of dishonesty. Now, dishonesty is not necessarily a conscious awareness. In other words, I could point to 1,000 people out there that might be listening to this show or other shows that are living in dishonesty, not because they intend to, and I certainly did for a long time, not because there's an intention to lie, not because there is a motive even to lie, but because we've been trained and entrained and educated from birth to not only to lie, but to accept other lies as our history, as our very foundation. We're not born of God. We're born of the founding fathers. We're not, we've got all these different sort of deities that we worship instead of nature. And that's an amazing, amazing fact. And so we live in this state of dishonesty. And dishonesty, I think, is a word that doesn't mean a lie. I mean, we have the word lie for that. Dishonesty is a state of being where, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you are being honest about a lie. You are literally worshiping something false. You believe that something is real when it is not. Again, the example would be to live in the Matrix. Right? The Matrix, you can have anything. They can make you wealthy or poor. They can switch, they can do anything to you. The question becomes then, once you know that you're being dishonest, once you know that you're outright lying, because then you can no longer call it just dishonesty, because then you have to admit, hey, I'm a liar. I'm the worst kind of asshole in the world. I'm a liar. And I accept the lie, and I build my fortune on the lie. I put my children through a lie, called public education. I even worship Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy, for God's sake, and I insist to my children that these fuckers are real. What the hell's our problem? So at that point, do you continue to live dishonestly, knowing? Do you give it all up and go back to honesty, go back to not lying, go back to your be reborn, as the Bible says, back into your innocence when you were originally born? What do you do? And it's so interesting to contemplate that, because hey, in the Matrix, I can have a mansion, I can have all the wealth I can possibly, I can have steak every night, I can do anything in the world in the lie. But when it comes to being honest, when it comes to living without the lie, I'm nothing. I'm only what I am. I'm only what I can do with my hands. I'm only what I am to other people who are in a similar situation. I have nothing of the world, as the Bible says. I literally am completely separated or circumcised from the world. I have none of that lie, that wealth, that abundance. I have to now suddenly embrace reality, right? That's a state of honesty. I don't know anybody that's honest, and this is the thing, Daniel. This is why I wanted to have you on today, because you're one of the few people out there who recognize this. I think who actually tries to live an honest life, to live without that dishonesty, without those benefits and everything else. And I know it's virtually impossible today to not be somehow mixed up with the devil's contracts and the systems, and everything's registered, everything's taxed. It's virtually impossible not to be somehow mixed up with it. But I don't see intention out there. I don't see people who really truly want to give up that steak every night. How many people will actually be willing to give up their mansions, to give up their wealth, give it to the poor? How many people are going to be willing to do that and be persecuted to the extreme, where people are going to be coming after you and harassing you and trying to take your property because you're no longer participating in the fraud? How honest do you think people are actually going to become? And I guess the real question, Daniel, I think the real litmus test for this is right now. We're in times where tomorrow things are going to be literally different than today. It's not like the times back in the pioneer days or whatever days. We're in times now where technology is increasing so much per day that you almost have to keep track of it daily. We're in a place where chips and even the very DNA, the CRISPR notion, all the stuff that we've talked about and exposed, all the chimeras they're building, all the genes they're patenting. We're in a place right now where if we don't separate ourselves and follow that law of nature, the law of nature, in other words, respect the laws of nature, the very design of life itself, and quit trying to alter it to our benefit, or whatever it is the hell these total freaks are trying to do at this point by making chimeras and whatever else. We're at the point where we can no longer pretend that we aren't persecuted. We can't. We've been persecuted since birth. We can't deny that anymore. The question is, as the persecution gets more tyrannical, and as the law says we must do this, this, and this, which is so against those principles, those laws of nature itself, which we call the law of God, at what point does the persecution become the artificial intelligence telling us that we have to connect to the computer? What point do we say enough's enough and literally detach ourselves and say, okay, none of that is worth, none of this wealth, none of this name, none of this title, none of these benefits, none of these retirements, they're all inducements for me to stay in that thing. And if I stay in that thing, I'm going to take these marks. I'm going to corrupt my blood. I'm going to corrupt the very design that I was born, the innocence that I was born in, the very laws of nature that govern my entire system, my body, my mind, and my soul. At what point do we say enough's enough? At what point do we realize that, hey, in the days that it is today as it was in the days of Noah? And at what point do we say, okay, that flood in the Bible was not water? That flood, you look up the word flood, it can be a flood of money, it can be a flood of disease, it can be a flood of plague, it can be a flood of all kinds of different things. It's a figurative term. What is our flood going to be, and who is it that's going to survive when nature says, holy shit, my design has been flawed, my design has been completely altered to the point where I'm not able to govern it anymore, and it's time to get rid of this shit. That's not blaming anything on God. That's saying, look, you're out of harmony, you're out of frequency, you're like a bad fucking note on a guitar. You don't belong here anymore. At what point do you realize that these people are no longer people? They're now the enemy of life and nature itself. I don't know what to say, Daniel, but All I can say is that this it's time we actually understand that we are in a system of persecution. It's called the legal system.
I think until people wake up to realize that the world they participate in is on a journey of suicide. It's in discord with harmony with God, with the Creator. Man has walked into this recreation or recreational activity of make-believe that's destroying everything. No one's going to get up in the morning and clear-cut thousands of acres of wilderness if there wasn't some bait of an illusion of wealth or money or wages to get them to do that. It wouldn't be natural to go out and do such an act. We would not pollute our drinking water. We would not pump pollution into the air. So many things would be different if we were not participating in that very thing. And so things have got so out of balance now that unfortunately, I think what's happening is people have become so complacent that they say, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And that's the fear factor that they're going to have to make a change. And if they make the change, then, yeah, their friends are not going to break bread with them anymore. They're going to think that they're completely, have lost their mind in the legal. Of course, you want to lose your legal capacity because you don't want to think in that world anymore. And at the same time, the consent to do wrong is the whole nerve in the tooth on this. If I say I will not consent as the book of Proverbs, and I always tell people, read Proverbs chapter 1. If anything you're going to read, take time, because that's proverb. It's for action, how you walk. Those are the Proverbs. And it says consent not. They even say, have one purse, have one, join in with us. And they're doing that. And what we've done is we've consented to everything diabolical because nothing, evil, cannot prosper without consent. It just, good has to stop consenting to participate in the evil. And then people say, but how am I going to eat? And those are all the scriptures that I've gone through in my head where I've had tons of people say this to me, Dan, but how am I going to eat? I said, well, you have to be willing not to consent first to get to that level. But if you're there to say, oh, I'm going to consent, but tell me how I'm going to get relief, I know that you can't get over that mountain until you at least put your 2 feet down and say, I'm not going to be in there anymore. And at the point they don't even realize that what they're going to do is they're consenting right now to their own suicide. Right now, at this moment, every single individual participating, whether you want to call it the Social Security program in the United States or the Social Insurance program in say, a place like Canada, you've actually consented by everything that you do in there. You've actually given them your blood, your DNA, and everything else, and they could just clone you anyways. To them, you've already said, I'm not worth anything. I'm willing to take some crumbs, a few benefits, to sell my soul to evil. And when you say I'm not for sale anymore, then you've kind of reached at least a spiritual barrier that will not allow you to walk in there, and you'll bother your conscience. And Clint, one of the things that we talked about earlier, about how people will view you. What I've noticed is anybody that I was associated with, and though I stood my ground, even though I said this is going to be it's going to be difficult, it's going to require, courage. You're going to have to be brave. You're going to have to basically stand your ground for truth. But what happens is if they turn around and then they start to blame you for even giving them what you found in research, and they turn on you, they turn extremely acidic to the point that these guys are worse persecutors of you than anybody that you've ever run into. No government official could turn as more evil. And what did the scriptures say? That it could be your own family. It could be your own people closest to you, or friends that you were associated with. And I've experienced that. I know you probably had that too, and you know the people that we're talking about. We've run through this. These people almost become the most arch enemies. It's almost like it's like when Judas, turned in Jesus. It said, and Satan entered him. The evil kind of took over. And so when you're dealing with the world that is so, directed to do this evil, yes, they're directed by evil in high places, and I do believe that the people in the power positions have made their deal with evil, and they don't stay there. The only thing they're afraid of is truth. True. When someone's standing that scares them.
You cannot forget that everyone in the Matrix is a potential agent.
Yes.
Right? That moment where they portray in that fictional movie that they portray the man turning into the same agent, the same exact agent every time, the same devil, in other words, the same representative, the same attorney. That's symbolic of exactly what you said. That is the devil taking over. That is the demon, the puppet becoming the master. It's literally the notion of your person, you becoming the person, or the person becoming you, to where you no longer control that person, it controls you. And that person says that anybody not normalized into this system must be destroyed, sought out, and punished or persecuted, destroyed. Literally, seek and destroy. That is the mentality that takes over people. And you're right, man. I have seen that moment. Sometimes it manifests in cognitive dissonance. It's almost like cognitive dissonance is a neutral point, like a neutral zone between battle, before people ever actually decide they're going to just turn into your arch enemy. Cognitive dissonance is almost like a cushion that once you see it, you better back off, because those people are about to turn into an agent and come after you with a gun. It's that bad. It's that ridiculous. And so basically, again, what you're saying, if we're on the same page, is it just goes back to personhood. You say that, again, Proverbs 1, I agree, pro-action. But they make it so easy, don't they? The devil simply says, hey, you want to be in my club, you just become a person of my nation. And that means that once you use that person, once you confirm and ratify that it exists and that you're its master, you're its agent, its attorney, well then, hey, guess what? You've just consented to the entire structure, the entire law. You've consented to the authority of the magistrates, the gods of that system. You've consented to the mammon and the value of money, and that it is your postscript. It is your only script. It's the only company store that you can shop at is one that takes the U.S. dollar or the Canadian euro, whatever, right? You've just consented to all of that by using the person, using the name that doesn't belong to you. So they make it so easy, and it really is just the notion of in movies or fictions or whatever, when the devil reaches out his hand and says, take my hand, what he's really saying is take my person, take my name.
And you're what happens in the consent, what you're really doing is you're consenting to be the host to an evil event, to allow that parasitical worm into you, the evil, and they do it, symbolically, just with the name, because everything is in a name. Everything you do is in a name, so they've come up with a false title. And so every birth record, that is out there, is basically symbolic of evil saying, look, your father is the father of the lie. So they put a spell, like witchcrafter you with that last name, that branding. It's a brand. And they're gaining all their royalties, all the evil, or just right to the end saying, look at all the all this glorious evil that we've made off of all these people who do not know who they are, where they came from. So we've created it's an imagery, it's imagination, it's idolatry, it's everything you could possibly think of to identify someone who isn't spiritual. They may be deluded into thinking that they're spiritual because, I watch it. I could see it, and I'm not there condemning or judging. I'm just saying I'm observing the fact is that audience, especially that Christian audience, especially down in the U.S., when I hear people saying they want Christians in political power in the U.S., I go, where the heck did they get that out of the Bible? Where did they think that the United States is God's kingdom? If they even wanted to even go all the way, did they think that Jesus Christ, when he did the Lord's Prayer, was saying the United States kingdom to come?
Some people do believe that. They believe that.
And it's so ridiculous. And then they call them the founding fathers and all this stuff that irks me. And I'm saying these guys were all Masonic pagans. They were wolves in sheep's clothing. And even though even though Noah Webster may give us a hint here and there, and he says, he wanted the United States to have a dictionary that was, or Americans based on a dictionary that had scripture in it. He was just toying, because you take that dictionary and you look at the Oxford Dictionary, it's 20 volumes thick.
Yeah.
And this is one volume. He dumbed down the population and got them ready to be manipulated. He put a little bit of truth here and there. Yeah, there's some scriptures quoted. Not that he followed it.
Well,
look at his last name. Look at Webb and then Stir.
There's no way to go through the Webster's dictionary without taking every single reference, which is either to poetry or to scripture or to some other history, and actually look and see what it says in context, right? You can't just go through Webster's and say, oh, okay, that's what it means. No, you have to actually, at the same time, compare all the references, like you would in the Oxford Dictionary. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so it's unfortunate, and I think what's happening is we've actually consented literally to suicide. And when I did one day, I was just going through the word. I said, it's kind of strange. Everywhere I go, it says customer parking in all the places, everything that's got something for sale. And I'm looking at custom. I said, isn't custom for foreigners? You think customs bringing something over the border because it's got a duty on it? It's kind of relating to things. And then we carry Visa cards. And I go, Visa's for a foreigner to work. And I'm going, there's stuff I'm missing here. So, I look up customer, and then it says the root of that is costume, okay? So in order to be a customer, you have to have a costume name. And then it said, see suicide. And I'm going, okay, I think I missed a lot of stuff over the years. Because I was in there too, blind, walking around, doing all that stuff, so I'm not calling the kettle black. I did the same thing. I think what happens is, it's an individual choice, an election, to choose good over evil. We may have been in it. We still have an ability to get out. There isn't a single contract it's not a contract unless there's an escape clause. And we've contracted to be a liar. We've said, I contract to be a liar under license. So I can pretend to be something I'm not, as long as I'm willing to pay for it. So I chose wealth over spirituality. And even the wealthiest guy in the world, he's just the furthest in debt. He just has more debt. He's used more people to obtain that, but it's all debt.
Well, yeah.
It's one big screwed up ledger. That's all it is. A screwed up ledger.
It reminds me of that notion that when you actually stop and actually consider it is ludicrous. But, I've said it before, back in my ignorant days, hey, I don't want to go to heaven. The party's going to be in hell. How many times have you heard people say something similar to that? Like, man, I look at who's going to heaven. I don't want to be there. And it turns out those people that you say are going to heaven are the ones going to hell. and they're there already. It's called the debtor's prison that we call the executor or the treasury of the United States or the United Kingdom or whatever. And you know, you think about it, those who do choose the wealth, those who do choose this lie, this matrix, they have already chosen hell. It's not that they're going to hell, it's that they're in it.
Well, they do it every day. Every time someone answers the phone, what is the most common response? Hello.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's where the party is, isn't it?
You just answered the debtor, so more than not, I've tried to, reboot my thinking, my what I do, because, I mean, we've been imprinted, so something that imprinting, has a long time to wear off, and you got to really be concentrated not to do it, but I know that there's no hello in the Bible, but there certainly is greetings. And so, when I started to use the word greetings, people go, something wrong with you? They would actually have that reaction. They said, greetings?
Yeah.
What are you, some kind of weirdo? Saying greetings? But it's okay to say hello because everybody's been imprinted to say hello. Well, there's hell. You just said you're a debtor. It makes sense because you would answer the phone with a debtor name because we use phonetics and speech, and so we add this name, and we're addicted to debt, so we add diction to our name. And there's and then they say that we're wrong on this, what we found through the law of language and what's in there, and then they won't even listen to what we found as the pattern on all these words, but they say no, but we can just use them as we want, and it doesn't really matter. You don't need to know that. And had people tell me, you're using these words, and now you're trying to make me dysfunctional. And I'm going, oh, okay. So, where do you go on this? But that's what truth does. It gets in the way of evil, and then evil starts to have a detox. And then it has a real problem. Well, actually, good starts to have a detox trying to get the evil out. So it's like you're trying to purify what is wrong. And when you start to realize that you are gaining a greater reliance on a spiritual maker, who's saying, look, I'm not going to come to your aid until you stop doing the wrong thing. Don't keep banging your head against the wall and then telling me you're bruising your head and there's no way out. Stop banging your head into the wall. And I think that seems to be the biggest problem out there, is that people are afraid that if they even started to contemplate doing this, they're already rationalizing they can't get out. They're already like, so I hope.
No. They're rationalizing that they can't get back in.
They don't realize they already have the solution. But the problem is they're participating in the problem.
It's the truth, Daniel, and you and I both have to admit it too. We are afraid to leave hell.
Mm-hmm.
We are afraid to leave hell and embrace the heaven that is nature. We are afraid. All of us are afraid. There's not one among us, including Christ, that is not afraid. It's okay to be afraid. You have to be afraid. If you're not afraid, then you're probably going to remain in hell, in the debtor's prison. If you have no fear of what it is you've already become, well, then there's something desperately wrong with you, or if you're a victim of the pharmaceutical, food doofus.
Yes. And conscience, I think the key thing is what's unique about us, about people, is that we have a conscience, and the only time the conscience doesn't work is when it's not exercised like a muscle, and so it becomes lethargic. And so what's happened is, in the world of evil, and I've spoken to government officials, attorney general, lawyers, they will just tell you straight off, in our legal view, your God-given name is no different than the surname that we basically use against you as you consent to take the assignment to perform for it. So that's how they work it. And so therefore, that muscle, and especially when you're talking to these people, they no longer have a resistance against evil. They now resist truth. So that's what you're up against. That is the evil in high places, and they've got their. I'm just saying, I'm not there to fight within that system. I'm there to separate, and that's really what be ye separate. When Scripture said, "For the followers of God to be ye separate," or followers of Christ to be ye separate, separate in its pure sense means private.
Yeah.
Because you do not belong to that aggregate. When it said he chose a peculiar people, peculiar means not common. If you have something that's the last names, these family names, are what they called commoners. So it's what you had in common. You were prostituted. You were the hireling spoken of in James, book of James, that the wealthy stole from the hired hand who reaped down their fields. They don't even realize that the fields are on the coat of arms on these family names. Those are the fields they reaped down. And it says they were never paid. They were held back by fraud. You were deemed to be a criminal because fraud is criminal. So if you do something criminal, it's fraud. But if you consent to being imposed, and tax means imposition, and imposition is fraud in law, having your will pushed on to somebody else, and everybody had free will from God. Free will, it cost you nothing. When we left the harmony of God's will, then we pay, and that's why you go to a lawyer to write your will, because there's a debt attached to it. He ain't going to write it. He's going to charge you to write it for you. So we've got a very crazy system of people just so caught in it that they're. When I stop giving up, when I give up, not resisting this, that's where I know that I've lost spirituality. And I know I've been tested and tempted, and as everybody else, it's so easy because we're surrounded by it. But isn't that the whole outline of the Bible? It was all about that, about men who had faith, that were brave, and those who just succumbed and said, what can we do? Might as well just join in on the bad.
Well, so, and that brings up a good point, to have faith. Faith basically just amounts to trust. Well, how... I always get a kick out of people who have pets or gardens or house plants or whatever it is that they're taking care of a part of nature that they've confined to their little prison, their little home in hell, right? And they imagine themselves as their own little creators, their own little gods, and they say, well, this plant can't, there's no way it can exist. There's no way it can live without me. And I'm like, these things have been living in nature for since time immemorial, since probably before man. Can you explain to me why it is that you think that this plant is so dependent on you, except for the fact that you did exactly what government does, which is to put you in a vessel that has no connection with the frickin' earth, no connection with land, no connection with water, no connection with anything, and so it's completely frickin' dependent on you, and you can't see that you're in the same frickin' vessel. You call it your house or your apartment, your title, your fiction, your name, your person. I'm like, the dichotomy here, the example is so clear that I don't know what to tell you. And so, really, when we say have faith in God, well, I'm sorry, but what that really boils down to is have faith in creation. Have faith in what you were born into and what you were meant to embrace and worship, which is nature itself. All of the food source and other, things don't come from government. They still come from nature. But if you believe that food comes from a store or from government, if you believe that your rights come from government, if you believe that everything about you that is of nature comes from an artificial source, well then, yeah, you're certainly in the Matrix. You're certainly in hell under the devil's contract in a debtor's prison. Absolutely you are. And so what is it to trust? What is it to have faith? Well, it means to trust in the very source of life, nature. I mean, I don't know how to put that, because it's not like you can. I mean, you can anthropomorphize God into something that makes you comfortable in your head, but I mean, the only access you have to God, I'm sorry, is through creation, through nature, through the design, to be part of the design, not to be opposed to it, not to be out of tune with it. That is what faith is to have faith that you will be able to survive without all the lies, without the fiction, without the contracts, without the name and title and everything else. You've got to be we have to be complete freaking idiots to actually be afraid to walk back into nature. I mean, that's absolutely insane when you think about it.
You know, it's an interesting thing. You when you're bringing up, it made me think of an incident, or at least a conversation I had with an individual. He owns a lodge in the northern part of Canada, and he was mentioning that a group of natives, not many, just a few, they grabbed, I guess, whatever they had from their Federal Reserve, where they were on a reserve, the Federal Reserve. Don't worry, they stuck everybody in the Federal Reserve. We're all not native anymore. We're all alternatives. We took the alternative name path, so we're not real anymore. So they took, I guess, their native path, and I have to give them at least the fact that maybe that's why they called them Braves originally when they were fighting. Remember, United States listeners, as Canada, you did do atrocities to these natives. And so they were brave when they were fighting you to an extent, because they didn't know what the heck you were doing other than bad, coming in and then trying to tell them how to giving them a misrepresentation of God and Christ and doing war versus peace. He did horrible things to these people. No wonder they have such a disdain towards the Bible and anything else. But these people that this lodge owner was telling about, they left the Federal Reserve with a few little humble items. A couple little, barely, you could get warm in a trailer idea. They took whatever they knew how to exist in. They left with it because I guess they couldn't take the horrible shelters they were given on the reserves with them that weren't barely heatable anyways. And they took them and they stuck them on some Crown property, what we call Crown here. The lodge owners in the area were complaining that these natives had gone on to Crown land without any permission. And they were sitting on these Crown land right in front of a nice lake, and squatting. So maybe that's where squatter came from, I don't know. But anyways, they had squats, so they went and squatted. And the forest, the fish and game officials said, when they were questioned on it, "Oh no," says we've seen all your complaints and all this stuff. We ain't touching that. We ain't going in there to take them into court or prosecute them. So it's interesting. So what made them brave enough to leave their hand out on that reserve? What is it? So I think that to some extent is at least a little bit closer to reality, and I can see that it's really just a lack of courage and good faith, not bad faith. Bad faith is how we are operating when we're operating under license and fiction. That's bad faith. That's what the lawyers represent. That's what these authorities of government, whether they're presidents of the United States or they're any kind of political regime that's out there that has their subjects of fiction, we consent to this, and we have the ability to leave that. And they just know there's so few that are going to do that. There's no point of trying to spend all that time in there. But what's happened is, the dissenters have stayed in the problem and then said they're going to leave. And you can't leave with something that doesn't belong to you. You cannot touch what is held in the common fiction and then say, "Hey, I'm going to exit. I'm going to take stage left. I'm leaving." No, you can't do that. You can't hold on to something that's not yours and continue to use it and then say, okay, now I'm private. No, you can't be private public. You can't. The last name is the tax, it's the money, it's the whole deal, and the beginning of that is understanding that.
That brings up a whole new can of worms, because I know I've been trying to tell people for a long time, and they hoo-ha me. They actually think I'm crazy for saying this, because most of alternative radio, most of the attorneys out there and people who are gurus and who sell people their paperwork, their paper terrorism as they call it, they want, they have an absolute dire need to believe that there is some light at the end of the tunnel that is the legal system. They don't want to know. They don't want to think about it as a closed loop system. They don't want to think about it. They want to think about it as a game, as a game that can be won. And the truth is, there is no winning. You never win. You cannot win because you're in hell. You're literally in hell. You cannot win in hell. Can you get to a higher level of hell? Sure, I'll get you that. You could even get a mansion and live like a freaking king. But you're still in hell. You're still under a system of law that will eventually either destroy you or cause yourself to destroy you. I don't know what to say to that except to say, look, I'm sorry, but you're playing a game that you have. I guess what it boils down to, Daniel, is that we're playing a game thinking that we're in control of our character, of our player, of our actor. Mm-hmm. But in reality, we are part of a wager that was bet at our birth that says we will confirm and ratify that person. We will become that person. We will become that demon. And we will operate in that thing, and, if we don't, we have insurance. If we do, we have reinsurance. Doesn't matter. They're going to win no matter what, because it's their person and their system. If it's their system, if the system is their property, if everything is the property, all the lies and all the shit that we follow, all the law, is property of the frickin' devil, how is it that you think you're going to win? And that is my message today. There's no winning. You're either going to choose to leave her, that harlot, that Babylonian thing that we call, manifest destiny, right? Or you're going to stay in it, and you're going to be a loser. You might have some nice things. You might be pretty. You might get, but you're in hell. I don't know how to put that. You're either going to make the choice to leave, or you're going to make the choice to stay. And you know what, Daniel? That brings up a really important word, because the Bible doesn't say that you should vote for God. The Bible doesn't say that you should vote for anything. The Bible says you need to make an election, and you need to make your election sure. Why?
That's right.
Why does the Bible not use the word vote? Well, if you follow the trail, if you understand the difference between the electoral college and the voting franchise, which is what slaves do. Slaves vote. What is voting? It's a poll. It's a prayer to the electors that they should elect the elect that you want them to elect. But voting under no circumstances is a choice. In fact, what I've found, Daniel, is that voting takes away your choice and legitimizes the choice of the actual electors. And so all these people who are going out and voting, vote for Trump, vote for Hillary, vote for third party, vote, you're actually giving up your power of choice by voting, which is the strangest thing I'd ever contemplated. The strangest thing I'd ever heard is that if I vote, I'm actually losing my choice. But that's exactly what the voting franchise is, because it's not us that does the electing, it's the electors. We are not the elect. We are not in power. We give up our choice. We legitimize those who are in power so that they may make the proper choice. What do they give us? Two family members, two of the bloodline, two every election. You had Bush And Kerry was the 34th great-grandson of King John, and the reason Bush won is because Bush is the 32nd great-grandson of King John. He's the eldest. He's the prodigal son, if you will, right? Now we have 13th cousins that are of the same grandmother, I believe it is, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Again, a choice between two members of the same whole. See, that's what voting is. Voting is an abstraction. When I make something abstract, I say, look, there's a tree. Let's separate the tree from the entirety and beauty and wonder and life force of the forest and just concentrate on the one abstract that is that tree. And let's pretend that that tree is not part of the entirety of the forest. Let's vote tree for governor of the forest, when the tree is nothing more than a part of the whole. And that's what voting does. It causes you to take a part of something that is the whole and pretend it's an individual thing. All you're doing is justifying the same fucking tyrants that have been in power since day fucking one. That's what voting is. You're giving up your choice. You're saying, oh, no, family knows best. You've been running the country. Hell, you've been running the world since before Caesar. Go ahead. You choose who the elect is. You make your election sure. We'll go ahead and vote, giving up our choice to ensure that you have the power to elect. And see, this is why the Bible says, you vote for God. No, you don't vote for God. You elect to be under God's authority and law, the very law of nature, or you elect to be exactly where you are in this shitty place we call United States jurisdiction, the nation of Goyim. That's what we've chosen. It's time to make a choice. And I'm sorry. For people who think that there's remedy, for people who think that there's a way out of this thing, for people who think that they can actually go into a court and win as if it's a freaking contest. No!
That's right.
There is no winning because you're a voter. You're not one of the elect.
100%. You cannot. What's happening is they don't even realize when you vote, you put an X in the spot, and an X means it's wrong. It's a mistake. A mistaken belief. That's all that shows you, as a mistaken belief of someone caught in fiction versus truth. So, and they think that those people that are running for the title are not gonna basically, they've set their own people in place, their own players are on the board. You're only selecting the ones they give you. So you have no choice at all in that situation. It doesn't matter which one you take.
Well,
and they've already fixed the race anyways on it.
You're always picking a part of the whole. It's an illusion. You're always abstracting from the whole. You're never separating. You never get a separate candidate. Oh, but what about Ron Paul? I loved Ron Paul. No. 20, how many terms senator or congressman? Are you kidding me? Yeah, he pulled a fast one. He was good. Why will Ross Perot? No, all these guys are just parts of the whole. They're family. They're the same people. And no matter what they sell you, they're selling you a lie. I want to be a president. President is a flattering title. It's a lie. I'm going to be president of the United States. The United States is a jurisdiction on paper only. It means absolutely nothing in the real world. It's a freaking lie. Well, I'm going to make America a better place. You can't make America a better place. God created the land and the territory that made America. All you're doing is taking a big shit on it. And you're calling it progress.
Clint, probably one of the most motivated comments or conversations we've ever had, but it's absolutely the truth. So you can understand, I think, when we've heard all these people that have called in the past, even on that previous show, and I can understand why you probably got to an end where you had to take a breather, because it got so ridiculous, the people that would call in that were so in belief that they could actually make a change in make-believe. They were actually had some authority in someone else's misconception of reality, and then they thought they could make good out of a lie, and you just can't. I mean, at the end of the day, I came to a realization it didn't matter. Okay, the money, I don't write it, I don't print it, it's not mine, so therefore everything that I've used in the make-believe, if I try to claim anything with it, well, in one sense, in the legal, it doesn't belong to me, because I didn't print it. It's not mine, so if I use someone else's checks and bills of exchange, then it's not mine. I don't care even if I are given a checkbook. Bottom line is the name that I use under license is not mine to begin with, so therefore someone else could call it in at any time and say, hey, I don't want you to have the license anymore, or I'm going to make it so difficult for you to use it that you're going to be in negative interest rates with the use of it.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? You can choose. The one choice you do have is to be persecuted nicely by following all the laws of persecution, or you can be persecuted harshly. Perhaps, your right to be put in pain, punished, taxed, licensed, and extorted, according to Title 42, Section 1981 of the damn U.S. Code, you're required to follow. So it's your right to be extorted, exacted, put in pain, and punished. It's your right to be put in jail. So it's your choice. You can be a good little citizen ship. You can be a good vessel, don't make waves, or you can be truly know what persecution is and really, get out of line and know the true system. The fact is, Daniel, and I don't know why people don't understand this, but the fact is that if you can be punished, if the worst, you got to look at the worst possible outcome, which technically is execution, right? Death, the death penalty. You got to look at the worst possible outcome of any system that you're a part of and realize that that is the true nature of that system. You don't look at the good things. You don't look at the benefits. You look at the sanctions, the punishments. You look at the end result of you getting out of line and actually following a spiritual path. That's death. That's the death penalty. If you murder somebody because they're trespassing, if you do anything that is out of line with the legal purview, you got to look at the worst possible sanction. That is the true nature of the society you live in. You don't look at the best. You don't look at that's ridiculous. You always look at the worst because everybody is susceptible to that worst, lowest degradation of law.
Yeah. What's coming, and I think that people at least should try to contemplate it. What is coming is a situation where, in the legal, because you don't control the title that's in there, you only use it by permission and license, and you're automatically deemed to be disturbing the peace, and you have to pay for disturbing the peace because you're disturbing the peace of truth with a fictional war title. That says you're nothing more than an animal that needs to be controlled, a domesticated, Gentile who's now referred to as a gentleman. You're just a gentle beast that's been domesticated. That's all that they're doing out there. They're controlling beasts of burden. And so what happens, they're eventually going to say, oh, well, we let you believe in certain things. You couldn't, you're trying to act on truth now while you're in the fiction. We won't allow that. So while you participate in it, you really don't have any at all consent anymore because you're gone. It's merged in. You've lost your ability to make a decision because now you're under the rules of evil. And they're going to eventually ban, and this is going to be the wake-up for at least the organized Christian community. These guys I have the hardest time talking to. I've had easier conversations with atheists than with organized Christian religions because they're the most blinded, and they don't realize that what's going to happen is they're going to ban the Bible because they're going to say it's a hate book because it says that certain things that are completely against morality and conscience are okay, and you're going to do them otherwise, and it doesn't matter. Well, they can do that to you while you're in. Now, you got to get out. The whole message in the scripture was to leave, not to stay in.
We can fix it. We can fix it. No. because it doesn't actually exist. It's
Come on now. We're going to get a truthful Christian participating in a lie as a political leader to get into the politics to bring the U.S. back to the founding fathers of lies. To bring you back to being a part of a constitution that constitutes you as a debtor. That has nothing to do with truth. I mean, it's almost so nauseating. The blindness of, I think there's certainly more outspoken people, I'd have to say, in the United States, at least in the people that are claiming to be part of that, than there is up here. Up here, I think they're just totally asleep and ridiculous. But the problem is the people down in there, especially the ones that are claiming that Christian label, they are so blinded, it seems like they're not reading the same book that I'm reading. And they're doing the things that it says not to do. You're not to be part of the world. You're not to be political. You're not to mess around with the foreign governments of against truth. You're supposed to be separate from that. But they're trying to participate in there and saying, no. Somehow the United States government is a theocracy or something from God. I'm going, no, it's the us, the U.S., the aggregate, the whole thing that's going to come down and collapse and probably send a shockwave across when it does. It'll look like the nation of Israel in the Bible when it collapsed. But it's not. It's not what they think, and so they're putting their faith in something. And when it collapses, along with the whole system it's attached to, all the ones operating it, it's going to look like devastation, and they're going to go, oh my goodness, somehow my Christian faith is being violated. And I'm going, hold on a second, it was never in there. You were never able to act really on it. You were just controlled by it. And so anyways, you cannot operate truth in fiction. Truth doesn't work in fiction. In other words, it doesn't work in fiction. You can't work in fiction with truth. It's opposite. Truth only works in truth.
Well,
and so failure to object can be fatal, but you can't object when you're in. You can't object when you're in. You can only remove yourself and object to them using what you do have is yours, that's unalienable, not infringible. That's what unalienable is. It's not infringible. You can't debtor it. You can't alien it. You can't be an alien in it. We're an alien to truth when we're in fiction. And fiction says you're an alien to them. So everything's opposite. Everything is opposite. What is proper is really improper and legal. Everything is completely vice versa. It's just, anyways, it's so hard for people to get themselves out of that, because until they can see the separation of that, and that's the identifying factor, that's a mark, that's a blemish. It's a blemish on your name because you've identified yourself of the nations. You're not of God, and therefore you call out all day long and ask for relief while you're participating in there, and he won't hear you, nor will he give you the power to overcome this. And so it's a very, very difficult journey, Dan, and I'm feeling extremely isolated on it. I know you are, and that's why we're talking. And I just hope that there's more people that can at least come to at least a beginning of standing for what's right. Not what's wrong.
Well, one of the things about you, Daniel, is that you your history, your life, is that you were involved in well, shoot, I don't know the proper term. I apologize, but taking care of animals.
Yeah.
And I find some of your stories that we've heard in the past to be very interesting. But I also look at some of the greatest writers in history and what they say about, basically, animal rights, if you will. You know, how should we treat our livestock? And what an incredible view on a society is. If you want to know what a society looks like, or what a society truly is, you look at the way it treats its livestock, right?
Yes.
And so when I look at the way that we have turned farming into this, commercial aspect, when I look at the way that we treat commercially and corporately livestock specifically, to me is one of the greatest clues that we are indeed in hell. And the notion that eventually, if we don't treat the animal class, those that have no rights, those that have no voice, if we do not treat them as we would have others treat us, then eventually, because we are doing so in a legal capacity, we're giving ourselves permission, in other words, to treat these poor defenseless beasts in ways that are almost unimaginable. Some of the horrors I've seen in the meat industry. If we have to realize that those corporations, those people who are running the show, in those that are allowing that type of atmosphere and situation and corporate greed and just absolute cruelty to happen, are the same people that are running our government, that treat us as livestock and consider us as nothing more than livestock that have been peopled across their lands. And when we get out of order, we will start to be treated as worse or maybe slightly better than all of these horrible factory farms that we see and don't do anything about. The fact that we're not, under the natural law and under the authority of God, stepping in and saying, no, I'm turning over your tables. I'm not going to allow you to treat this beautiful, wonderful part of nature, this life, in this way, means that we, by all intents and purposes and by the laws of nature, should be treated the same way that we are allowing those creatures to be treated. That's my opinion.
Yeah, we've actually, to an extent, we've become branded cattle by consent. We are actually worshiping ourselves to an extent through selfishness. What's self and ish, right? Self and ish is man. So we've become so idolatry related, and that's what it is, like the golden calf that the Israelites decided to do like the regular nations. They wanted to be like the pagans, so they created this artificial thing to worship, and they said that was the God that got them out of Egypt, delivered them. You can imagine. I don't even want to use that word. It's just a horrible thought to realize what they went through to go to that level of thought. And so we've done the same thing. So this is self-idolatry, and we participate in it, and we're away from truth. And only evil can do that. So everything is wrong. We're consenting to be milked like a domestic dairy cattle that would normally never stay lactating.
Yeah.
Because the calf only feeds for a period of time on the mother, just as with people, and then it would stop. But what we do is everything in society. Look what we even do with the milk that we talk about that's out there. We kill it, we pasteurize it, we stick some color in it and some vitamin D, and then we say, let's drink it. And those poor animals are full of disease from that milking process. So we do everything so unnatural, and we make it look so real that we buy it. We buy into it. And so we're being milked, and that whole false concept is actually parasiting off of us. But we're the host, and we host the event.
Well,
and it's got to stop.
And it's that position. This is the problem with, we always say that power always corrupts. And, when you're in a dominant position over over everything, which man at this point technically is, not a dominance that is aristocratic or honorable, but a place where we say, well, animals are just, as Voltaire said, just we think of them as just animated machines. Basically, where he says that it's amazing that they should express so well the feelings that they supposedly do not feel, right? The soul that they supposedly do not have, which is a purely legal view, of course. Mark Twain said it is. This is what fascinates me, and this goes back to the Indians. We treated the Indians essentially like we should have ourselves be treated. As far as I'm concerned, we deserve to have done to us what we did to them. It is just like man's vanity and impertinence to call an animal dumb because it is dumb to his dull perceptions, right?
Yes.
Well, so what did we call the Indians? We called them savages. Now, to most people, a savage means cruel, barbarous, fierce, ferocious, inhuman, and brutal. But that's not what savage actually means. It comes from the Latin silva, or a wood, or silvicola, which is an inhabitant of a wood pertaining to the forest. So we're talking about a creature of nature, wild, remote from human residence, i.e. being registered in society and civilized. Improvements, wild, untamed, uncivilized, untaught, not publicly educated, rude. And, then it finally says cruel and barbarous. But in Webster's particular assessment, he says, a human being in his native state of rudeness, one who is untaught, uncivilized, or without cultivation of mind and manners. Now, that is the opinion of someone who is completely brainwashed by all the lies that we've been talking about, all the notion that their blood makes them better than others. Fiction, right? The savages of America. See, this is what's so fascinating to me. Anybody that ever calls these people, barbarians or savages, really needs to listen to this. The savages of America, when uncorrupted, this is 1828, when uncorrupted by the vices of civilized men, are remarkable for their hospitality to strangers and for their truth, fidelity, and gratitude to their friends. But they are implacably cruel and revengeful towards their enemies. Right? So from this last trait of the savage character, that's where the word came to signify. So you've got literally the enemy of fucking nature. You got the enemy of peace, the enemy of all men coming in, setting up their corporations, their East India Company and their Virginia Company, going out, sweeping the land so that they can resettle and resource everything in sight. And when they do that to the Indians, who for all intents and purposes were extremely, extremely civilized in their own way, according to what and as far as I'm concerned, the definition of the savage Indian sounds a lot like what a Christian should actually be. Very, very hospitable, very welcome to strangers, all about the truth, no lies, and absolute gratitude for all companions and friends that are like-minded, but absolutely, I don't know if cruel and revengeful is a good word, but absolutely thwarting their enemies. And so what they had, what we have in America is we are the enemy. We are the ones that either allowed it to happen by not standing up for the defenseless, or for being the soldiers who were paid mercenaries to go and kill them. We were the enemies, and of course the enemy would call the peaceful inhabitant who didn't want to be removed from his land that wasn't even his land, it was God's land, it was truth, right? The enemy, of course, is going to call these people a savage. And they're going to mean by that not simply that you're part of the inhabitants of the woods like any animal should be, but hey, you're cruel, you're barbarous. Because we came and killed and raped your women, you're cruel and barbarous because you actually fought back. You know why they don't call us savages, my friend? Because we are so brainwashed and so in love with the lie that we're called civilized. We're called public. We're called, the general population of slaves. The only difference between us and them is that we're not killing our enemies.
And I think what people have to understand too, or at least take a really clear research into, when you look at the law of nations, which is international law amongst all those participating nations that are part of this aggregate of what we know they're moving towards everything being democracy everywhere, right across the globe. The idea behind that, or the concept, the idealism behind this, is it's against this idea of native, which means no artistry, no fiction. Called the Christian, what Christ's scene was called the nativity scene. But we don't even understand what native is. And the natives, just so you understand that no tribe was ever part of the international law of nations. So when they made treaties with them, this is out of the, I can grab the book. I'm sure it's the same everywhere, but it's at least a Canadian law commentary on the international law of nations, and it stated that the tribes were never ever part of the international law of nations, never part of it, never in there, and therefore they never had to honor the treaties that they entered into them with, because they were never part of anything to be in a treaty with them. So they were never part of the world. Now, they attacked them because they were known as tribes. Now, Christ was of the tribe of Judah. So he was no part of the world. As he stated, my kingdom is no part of this world.
He was a savage.
So therefore, he's not part of the world. So therefore, why this pure title of Christianity had to be slammed into the fictional world and then misrepresented by the Vatican and the protesters and all the things that people, and then sticking these titles on top that we weren't supposed to accept according to the book of Job 32, 21, 22. We just basically have become deceived because of our lack of knowledge, and we're going to perish over this because that Christian title, if we want to call it that, or that Christian label, in its pure sense, when you say my God-given Christian name, you're saying my no part of the world name. And that only happens by standing on it, because it's the only thing left I can see in truth, and because it's not, you cannot, something unalienable cannot be, you can't repudiate it. You can't reject it because it's truth. It's what it is. You can't remove the truth.
But how many?
But you can sure cloud it with fiction.
How many people, though, Daniel, out there have the notion of the figurative or metaphoric aspect of what the world is? When you look up the word world, that sounds, well, that's just Earth, right? No, that's not.
No.
The Bible doesn't use terms that are literal. It uses figurative terms. When it says the world, it's talking about all the shit we're talking about, all the fiction.
Exactly. God felt sorry for those caught in the fiction. For God so loved the world, he was talking about the aggregate mess of those who had been deceived into becoming part of the lie.
Well, and
he sent his son to send them truth.
You and I today, Daniel, as you said, you're not here to judge. It's the same. It's you and I are here the same reason that Christ said he was here. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to warn you. I'm here to make you to cause you to not be judged, and that simply means not to frickin' commit suicide, not to die from your own stupidity. Right? We're not here. We're not here because we hate people. We're here because we love people, and we want people to get the hell out of that hell.
All it is in the world of the make-believe is it's a delayed judgment with all these debtor document birth certificates, these before Christ documents, and these bankruptcy certificates, because we're bankrupt in evil when we participate in that and identify ourselves under that with the ID, the idolatry, the idealism of misconception, a miscarriage of justice because we continue in a lie. So if we do not see this, well, all it is a delayed execution, and all they have us out there is on, you're working off a debt that you'll never be able to work off because you can't pay for sin. In their world, they have it the same way. There's no way you can pay debt with debt. So therefore, all it is a banknote that they are going to collect on, because they can always collect on it. The only thing that stops the collection of a banknote is when it's been declared fraud, counterfeit. And until you step up to the plate, which I hope, that's what I believe there is the ability to do, is to literally declare the statement that was made against us at birth that implied we were part of the world, to declare it void ab initio. It was void from the beginning.
So to be clear, and that is a subject I wanted to touch on. We have these words that are in the same family. We have persecution and execution. Execution is the performance of something. Persecution is the infliction of pain, punishment, or death, which, of course, citizenship is death. It's called spiritual death or civil life. Fictional life, in other words. Life without spirituality is what citizenship is. So, I mean, execution, it would just be technically the performance, the end of the contract. Right? It's time to die. It's time to be depopulated, because that's really what execution of the persecution would be, right?
Yes. The intent of the evil is eventually to call in all the debtor notes.
The dead. Call in the performance.
Yes, and they know that they don't need all those performers out there anymore that are trying to struggle to perform. They're really not out on parole; they're out on payroll, and they're gonna basically eliminate them, which seems very, 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 I would say, uncannily real against the scripture that says that a large segment of the population of Revelation would be wiped out due to plagues. Who knows what they got in plan, but the participants will be consenting to be eliminated. It's almost like walking into your own execution by consent.
Well, and there again, a plague. What is a plague? I think when most people think of the word plague, they think disease, some form of toxic, whatever. Plague is a word that's very, very general. It just means anything troublesome or vexatious, right? It can be a disease, but it's a state of misery, it's evil, it's calamity, it's all kinds of things. It can be anything. So, when you say plague, don't just think of disease. Think of, how about the butt of a gun? That's just, the word plague comes from the word plaga, or to stroke or strike. So, I mean, to the root of flog or afflict, so people have the wrong idea about these things. So it's important. Let's go over this term, because, we've talked about on my show, we certainly talked about the notion of pleading the baby. If you go to Black's Law, I think 2nd or 4th, you can find plead the baby or pleading the baby act, which means basically that, hey, when you created this person, I had no knowledge of contract. There's no way I could have, followed the rules of contract, which is consent and assent and all that stuff, understanding. I couldn't. I was a child, so I'm pleading the baby. I'm saying that you did this when I was under the age of consent, etc., etc., etc. And so the idea behind that is to say, well, during my life, I was conned, tricked, publicly educated, and entertained into confirming and ratifying that person, so that I started acting in that person, in that property of the state, without understanding the law, without understanding anything about it, because my parents were just as ignorant as I am, and they were induced into doing it. And so at this point, now that I've actually become spiritually aware, because I understand that I have to make my election, and my election must be sure, I want to void this. I'm going to plead the baby. I'm going to say, hey, I didn't know what I was getting into. You didn't tell me. You didn't educate me. You didn't do your job in public education. You tricked me. You conned me. You constituted me. So I'm going to void this birth certificate, this contract, this person, as it applies to me. I'm going to void the last name as it's attached to my God-given name. I'm going to make that election, and I'm going to void it ab initio. So tell people what that means and why we should be looking into that.
Okay. Well, you will get your day in court. That's all I'm going to say. And this is going to require people that are brave, with truth, willing to thwart off evil. And this is probably the most powerful thing. Maybe we had touched on it before on the odd show in the past, but I think we didn't really get into it heavy. And so this, to me, I've heard this from government authorities who would listen to me, understand where I was at, though being left alone. I was being left alone. I had, little or no contact, that did not, in a way, kind of know that I was already there in faith, but had not really completed the journey. And they said they required a court order to stop the document or the statement or the purported legal status from continuing. So my belief is, in the best I can say in truth, to anybody listening, is that this won't stop until we stop it, but we have to be the one to initiate this moment, because they're not going to do this because they've already got our consent participating. And so why would the side that's winning on the legal want to give up or shoot themselves in the foot? But law is made in the court, not in the legislature. And so you need to go in there because the document has to be declared void. And so I'm going to read out of Duhame's Law Dictionary. It was probably the best I had found explaining this. It's void or void ab initio means not legally binding. A document that is void is useless and worthless as if it did not exist. A purported legal status. Remember the word purported. It's just like alleged. It really hangs on that it's not really truthful. It's just looking like truth, but it's not. So it's a purported legal status, like you're being accused of being of that legal status, that legal surname, title.
Felony.
Or a legal document that is taken to have never been valid or enforceable from the start, from the moment of its purported existence. Now remember, you only have a purported legal claim to those titles. That's why you need a license. They know you really don't have it, but you're willing to go to the next level. So of course it's wrong to do something that's not truthful, so you're kind of executed for the lie.
Anything,
but you're not really totally executed. They haven't really gone the full way on it. They've only done a paper execution.
Anything to stay in hell, right? Anything to stay
right.
In yeah.
And then we become the surety for this fictional participator or liar. So it's like a representation of our share of the aggregate of sin and debt. And so we become surety for it, and that's where your social security system comes in. This third party surety steps out of nowhere and says, I'll be now this, and then they insure your participation, and they insure the risk of that note that you're willing to take on all the debt and indulgence you could possibly sin in fiction.
Yeah, that reminds me, you talked about customer parking.
Yes.
And how that's customs and only foreigners pay customs. Well, that's actually a true statement, because remember, the agency, the three parties in agency are the principal, the agent, and the third party. So you're literally, every time you pull into a shopping center, you're there as a foreigner, you're a United States citizen, well, here anyway, you're a United States citizen and you're in a private state. You're pulling in. You have license to be there. You have residence. In other words, you're pulling into a corporation that is registered or incorporated under that state, and therefore it's a third party to the agent, which is a foreign agent of the principal foreign nation. And so you are a foreigner. You are a customer. You do have to pay customs and pay taxes and pay commercial fees and all of that stuff. So in that regard, that is a true statement. So what we're trying to get after is, well, how do I do all that without being a customer? I want to be, government has two functions, taxpayer and non-taxpayer or commercial, for-profit, non-profit. So the non-profit stuff is supposed to be for technically for quote-unquote citizens, but everything else it does, it specifically calls us as customers. How can we be customers of government? Well, because government participates in commerce, and we voluntarily say, yes, I want to be a part of that. That's the problem. So again, the citizenship thing is the concept of something that is avoidable, that we make unavoidable, or I should say voidable, but we make it unavoidable by using it, collecting debt and all that stuff. So that brings us to the solution. Solution means only one thing, which is end of contract, end of relationship, period. There is no other solution. I'm sorry. Everything else is remedy or whatever, where you're going to be a loser no matter what you do. The only winning in this thing is going back to God, going back to God's law and nature, which is a solution, which means ending all fiction, ending all contract and contractual relationships. That brings us back again to the to make something void ab initio, which means from the beginning.
And when you look at it, your first name, just consider it the first party. You can look up on a few definitions of last name. It'll even say they call it a second name. So we'll take the first name as the first party, the second name as the second party, and then what they do is they say until you decide which side you're on, you're kind of merged into a dispute between good and evil, and so we'll insure it in a third party risk pattern. And then you become this third party who really doesn't have anything in either to an extent, but you're definitely going to take on the liability of the error because it's resting towards, of course, something that isn't real, so it goes into the legal, so you become weighing more in the view of you being liable as a surety for this error that you're going to participate in under license. Because their system is based on the legal title, the artificial title, which is the second party. So you enter into a third-party agreement as the surety for it, even though you're really dead in legal, based on the symbolic end of what the birth certificate is. You're really dead. So, anyways, we'll go back to the void ab initio. It says, oddly, what is void or voidable is, as far as it matters between the participants, still in force until challenged or rebuked, as the actors to the legal drama, not yet unfolded, proceed as if the void document or status was lawful. So I could hand the statement of birth document or what my parents filled out that appears to have the given name and surname on different lines. I could hand it to the officer. He's immediately going to think that you have title. Yeah, that's who you're registered as. But in reality, you're not, because you really don't have it. It must clearly have written across the face of the instrument when there's anything to do with patent title or these last names. It must have, on a grant, it must say, given for patent right. Now, because no one has that anywhere that I've seen many, many birth documents, statement of birth, birth certificates. No one has that written across. Nothing we have has that. Even your driver's license, just say name. It's ambiguous because it's unclear. But as long as you're willing to take your picture and put your signature down, you're taking on the surety. It's a one-way go at that point. You're the guy on the hook as the guarantor. The government's just co-shirting the position, but they know it's not yours.
Voluntarily, that's the most important word.
So, and then it goes, if when judicial determination is required, the court will declare a document or purported legal status void, an exercise that is by definition retroactive, which means it will go right back to the beginning. Now, that's what born again means, just so you understand that. The true meaning of born again is not a rebirth. It's bringing you back to the Genesis in the Scripture before Adam sinned, before he walked into the lie. It's as if the guilt or the debt never existed. That's like a pardon.
Adam means mankind, all men that have been put into this system of persecution or death.
Let's call it a damnation.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, anytime a court of law exercises its prerogative or choice of time travel, the declaration that something, because Galatians 6:3 says, if a man thinks he is something when he is no thing, you're not a thing. Okay, you're real. The declaration that something that has been relied upon for years was void from the start, from the beginning, can sometimes produce unusual results and consequences. Well, I'm sure it will, because it will put the inducer of the official error on that document on the hook as the actual co-signer when you default for being the signer on the loan, on the debt. But until you challenge that, it will not happen. So where's my direction right now? That's where I'm going. If people want to hear what am I doing right now, that's the direction I'm going down, is to get the day in court to challenge the purported legal status and void it so that
I'll tell you what,
it'll be canceled.
We've got just a couple minutes left, Daniel. Thank you so much for coming on and you know, everything you've done in our lives, helping us to, you know, navigate through all of this stuff. I find it very interesting because one of the things I discovered is that, you know, Genesis is not the account of God creating nature. It's the account of kings and gods, or Elohim, creating the world, which we know is the fiction. Right, so this almost reminds me of the notion of when you see in, say, a movie where someone has a vision and the whole movie turns out to be a dream, right? That's kind of the way this almost sounds, to void it and go back to the beginning, or back to the Genesis. You know, and you're right there about to take a step into the quote-unquote legal world, the fiction, and you've just had this sort of vision, if you will, this prophecy of what happens when you do, and you're going back to that very moment, and it's time to once again make that election. You elected to be part of the fiction. At this point, by voiding this thing out, you're starting over, and you're given the choice again. You're not making the choice, you're being given the choice again. You're going back and being reborn into that aspect, into that point where you're going to step, and your step is either going to be to follow the example of Christ or to go back into the fiction. And if you're going to follow Christ, it's going to be very difficult, and you're going to have to suffer, and you're going to have to do all kinds of things to stay out of this system. But you have now the idea of what it is. You've had the vision. You've had the notion. You understand how evil works now. And now it's time for you to void it out, go back to the beginning, be reborn into nature, and follow the correct path, as if it never happened.
And I believe this will be we'll say the word world right now. It will be seen in the world because it will have an impact when people wake up to this truth and start walking with God, with the truth, the Creator, not the fiction, not the recreators, not the evil that's been running the world. They're going to be held holding the bag on this, and these bankers and evil guys are going to just basically have a bad moment and they're caught with their lie, and they're going to try to make it look like we're the cause of the economic shutdown.
There it is.
Rounds a minute, try to stop them. Don't put that on your wish list. That's retarded babble. Protesters make the hit list soon as they start to rabble. They are nothing but fishes in the barrel. It doesn't have to be Christmas for a carol. Some decorate with ornamental decorum. Some perform Shakanar on Hanukkah and Purim. That's where my job come in. I am a blessing to the mercenary for the corporation selling weapons to them. Any potential competitor step into them. I'm authorized to knock them out and stick a GPS into them. They want